And from current slide. Okay. Current former B teamers. You know, decathlon didn't exist when I was a high school student. I would have been a C teamer. Just saying. 2.53 GPA, go team. Anyway, all right. So, Ed,
Can I ask
yes,
a
yes,
question?
absolutely.
I'm getting that black, like a big black square on the upper right. Okay, it's gone. Thank
Oh,
you.
how interesting. Okay,
We had it before and now it's gone.
okay. Well, good. I bet that was, I was trying to look at the chat window and I thought, oh, can I leave the chat window up? But then it was causing my screen to glitch out there. Okay. So this is one Art-Edmonia Lewis. She was born July 4th, 1844. Both parents died by the time she was only 9 years old. Her father was from the West Indies. He worked as a gentleman's servant. Her mother, Catherine Lewis, also known as Wildfire. We're going to come back to that. There's a debate also as to whether Wildfire is 2 words or 1. We'll live with either one. Her mother, Catherine, was Ojibwa or Chippewa, depending on your pronunciation, Native American and African American descent. So half African American, half Native American, and her father was from the West Indies. Her older brother was named Samuel, and they both were given Ojibwa names, Native American names. Catherine, Wildfire, Samuel, Sunshine. Okay, so just kind of interesting. So her mother, wait, did I get that right? Wow, now I'm second guessing myself. So I'm going to go back here. There were some things in the art resource guide that were incorrect and things that I did research that were correct. Yeah, I knew I had this. It was me being stupid. It wasn't the art resource guide. Art resource guide has this correct. I put this in the wrong place. Her mother was Catherine Lewis. It wasn't her mother that was Wildfire. It was Art-Edmonia, who was Wildfire. So I'm going to put this in up here. Don't you like me editing while I lecture? You know, this is cutting edge stuff when the teacher is editing his slides while he's giving the presentation. I have to correct errors like that when I see them. So his mother, his Edmonia's mother was Catherine Lewis, and she was Ojibwa, Chippewa, and African American descent. And Edmonia had a brother. Her older brother was named Samuel, and his Native American name, his Ojibwa name, was Sunshine. Edmonia's Ojibwa name was Wildfire. So I knew I had that in the wrong place. I'm glad I fixed that. I think I shared this with Mrs. Scully, and it doesn't have that correction in it, so I've got to remember to change that. Anyway, because her parents died by the time she was 9, Art-Edmonia was raised by her mother's 2 sisters, who supported the family by making and selling Native American crafts to tourists in the Niagara Falls region. Anybody who's in Decathlon last year, we studied a lot of artwork about Niagara Falls. There's always these connections. Her older brother, Samuel, left for California in 1852. So if she was born in 1844 and her parents were dead by the time she was 9, then her older brother left right around when her parents died. Just saying, going there for the gold rush. But he continued to send money back to support his sister, Art-Edmonia, and her educational pursuits, which were extensive. Edmonia Lewis enrolled in the Baptist Abolitionist School in 1856. She would have been 12 years old. She entered a pre-college program at New York Central College in McGrawville, New York, where she discovered her love of drawing. She then moved to Ohio and enrolled at Oberlin College. Actually, she moved to Ohio to enroll at Oberlin College in 1859. So imagine, she was born in 1844 or thereabouts. The research on that is a little bit iffy. That would have made her all of 15 years old when she enrolled at Oberlin College. So either the date of her birth is off or she was highly precocious. Could have been both. Oberlin College is the first college in the United States to admit African Americans, Native Americans, and women. I never knew that. Fascinating. This link here is just if you want to visit Oberlin College virtually. Doesn't really, you're not going to get tested on anything in the link there. This is where it becomes really dicey for Edmonia. She had a really difficult time at Oberlin. So they're sounding really progressive, right? They're the first college in the United States to admit African Americans, Native Americans, women. Great. There's even a place here. I found this photo. This is the Edmonia Lewis Center for Women and Transgender People. And it's there on the campus at Oberlin College. She had a really difficult time there. There were several documented negative encounters with classmates. She was accused of poisoning wine of two of her classmates with Spanish fly in 1862. Probably not. Do you think people were probably bigoted and racist back then? I'm betting they were. She was attacked and beaten by vigilantes before the court case. So she's accused of poisoning her two classmates. Nothing to prove that she poisoned them, but well, you know, she is who she is, so she must have done it, right? She's attacked and beaten by vigilantes before she even has a trial. There's no physical evidence of the crime. She's cleared of wrongdoing in court and allowed to return to school, where a year later, she's accused of theft by a classmate. I'm thinking the campus wasn't as progressive as the people running the show wanted it to be. That's just my idea here. Again, the second accusation here, she's acquitted for lack of evidence, but not allowed to enroll in further classes or to graduate. She's only one semester away from graduating, and they say, you know, you're just causing too much trouble. She wasn't causing trouble. She kept getting accused of things that she probably wasn't doing, right? I mean, I don't know if she was innocent, but we certainly don't know that she was guilty. And I'm kind of leaning towards the innocent side myself, but there you go. I mean, yeah, there, just look at her. She looks like a, you know, horribly cruel person, right? Poisoning people, and yeah, it just stop. All right. So she, a semester before graduation, she left Oberlin, goes to Boston. This is 1864. She's 20 years old. She's already been through all this. So if she'd been able to stay, she would have graduated at the age of 20, 21. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. There are prominent abolitionists in Boston that helped her to become a sculptor. They specifically mention William Lloyd Garrison and Lydia Maria Child. I'm sure that should be a capital M, but I goofed again. Won't be the last time. They also mention Edward Brackett, a sculptor. He helped her set up her own studio. She achieved financial success through the sale of portrait medallions of abolitionists John Brown, I think Kansas, and Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. Shaw, who was white, commanded the 54th Massachusetts All-Black Infantry. Sales of these medallions that were portrait medallions of John Brown and Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, sales of these medallions allowed Lewis to travel to Europe in 1865. So they must have been extremely popular. That's a lot of medallions if that finances a trip to Europe. She visits London, Paris, and Florence, visits and ultimately settles in Rome, where she finds a group of like-minded expatriate women sculptors. It's like, hold your horses. There's actually a group of formerly American women sculptors who all set up shop in Rome because they find more intellectual freedom there. Never knew about this. And I've been lecturing on art in Decathlon for over 30 years. Like, this is the first time. So it's always neat to find out something new. So this bears a whole slide, right? American women sculptors in Rome. They mentioned multiple ones. Harriet Hosmer welcomed Edmonia Lewis into her community of American women sculptors in Rome. Hosmer had been in Italy since 1852. She was the unofficial leader of the group of these expatriate women sculptors from America. They specifically mentioned Emma Stebbins, Louisa Lander, and Vinnie Breen. And here's a nice photo of Harriet Hosmer. I'm imagining that this is Harriet here in the middle, with her assistants and carvers in the courtyard of her studio in Rome in 1867. It's been 15 years later. This is an albumen print. You could study the history of photography, and the albumen comes up in early photos. Hosmer welcomed Edmonia Lewis into a community of American women sculptors in 19th century Rome. This has got to be Harriet, because she's the only female in the photo, right? So Henry James, a writer of some note, referred to the community as, quote, that strange sisterhood of American lady sculptors who at one time settled upon the 7 hills of Rome. I thought they were going to say the strange sisterhood of the traveling pants, but that's a different movie. Anyway, in America, if you can imagine, the physicality of sculpting was perceived as too masculine. It's like, you're a female. You can't be damaging your pretty little hands sculpting things out of marble. If you recall, we studied Patience Wright, who birthed her wax sculptors from underneath her skirt. She kept things underneath her skirt to keep the wax warm, right? And that was like really, but she played on that, right? But it was like scandalous. Well, she was a lot more successful in Europe because I guess they were just a little bit more forward thinking. Over in America, females don't sculpt. You don't even sculpt wax, right? It's just not done, right? Gender roles were heavily prescribed in 19th century United States. They had what's known as the cult of true womanhood. This is another one of your glossary terms. The cult of true womanhood on page 113 in your resource guide, a 19th century American societal standard that emphasized women's domesticity, piety, purity, and of course, the most important, submissiveness above all other qualities. Yeah, sorry, folks. That's the way it was back then. Women were expected to find creative fulfillment in private domestic pursuits like needlework and quilting. But the sculpting thing is not for women. Carving marble, traveling abroad for art training, just stop. So there were many fewer social constrictions for American women in Rome. Lewis had much greater artistic freedom as a Black woman in Rome than she had ever experienced in the United States. There's a quote in the book, resource guide. I was practically driven to Rome in order to obtain the opportunities for art culture and to find a social atmosphere where I was not constantly reminded of my color. The land of liberty, meaning United States, had no room for a colored sculptor, much less a colored female sculptor. I added that. Rome, and by the way, this is a recently unearthed photo of Edmonia Lewis in her Rome studio. That's why I put this on this page. It's like they didn't find it too long ago, like in an attic somewhere in Italy. Whole article about these people who uncover stuff like this. Anyway, Rome offered antique sculpture for study. Imagine, guys, when you're living in Rome, you walk out of your apartment, you go down the street, and there's ancient ruins. I mean, it's like everything's just there, right? So Rome offered the antique sculpture for study, ready access to statuary marble, trying to find good marble to carve statues out of in the colonies, not so easy. Remember, the United States still getting their act together. It's like stone cutters, especially advanced stone cutting, finding rock quarries that would have the right kind of rock, right kind of marble. They've been doing stuff like this for thousands of years in Europe. In the colonies in the United States, they hadn't. So none of that was readily available. So she had antique sculpture for study right nearby, ready access to statuary marble to use for your sculpting, skilled stoneworkers as studio assistants, and wealthy clientele, i.e. rich tourists on their grand tours. Whenever you go on a grand tour, you're usually going to London, Paris, Rome, or at the very least, England, France, Italy. Many American sculptors in Rome paid Roman artisans to carve their sculpted models out of marble. In fact, take a look at this Harriet Hosmer, right? This is a photo of her in her studio in Rome with her assistants and carvers. So this is a female sculptor. Look at how many assistants she has. Think of how much more labor intensive sculpting out of solid marble is compared to painting, right? I can paint by myself, but getting a huge block of marble requires a lot of, dare I say it, manpower, right? And finding it and then just sculpting it. If you're famous, you can set aside little, why don't you sculpt the hand out of the marble here? And why don't you sculpt the leg out of the marble here? Why, it's all in one piece, but you could have different people working on different parts. Edmonia did not have that kind of money, right? So she lacked the funds to hire help the way Harriet Hosmer did, and chiseled most of her marble sculptures herself. So the one we're specifically studying is titled Forever Free. This is actually its nickname. It's not its original title. And this is it over here on the right here. It's her first major work. It's a life-sized sculpture finished 1 year after moving to Rome, originally titled The Morning of Liberty, because this is literally the idea for this. It's depicting literally the morning of liberty. We're talking about why is there a morning of liberty? Forever Free is inscribed on the base of this statue. It's alluding to Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which was issued January 1st, 1863. So it's the morning of a new year and a new era in the United States. In this proclamation, this is a direct link to the proclamation, and one of the things Abraham Lincoln says is all persons held as slaves within any state shall be then thenceforward and forever free. And if you want to read the entire Emancipation Proclamation, they're not going to test you on it, but they are going to talk about that phrase. So forever free, forever free. In this sculpture, we have a woman shown kneeling with a manacle around her ankle, looking upward. She clasps her hands in a gesture of gratitude. Next to her is a bare-chested man looking upward. Again, contrapposto pose, stiff right leg, bent left, kind of an curvy S-shaped body, classic Greek sculpture. Pose. One arm on her shoulder, one arm upraised, classical contrapposto pose, bent leg resting on a ball and chain, alluding to confinement. Raised hand holds a broken manacle and chains. There's an intact manacle remaining on one of his arms. Freedom has not yet been fully attained. If you, I don't think this is 3D, but it does have different views. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. No, does this? No, I think that just gives me the link. Yeah, I don't need that. This kind of tilts it so you can see different things. I think he's got one broken manacle and he's holding it, and then the other one is still, so that's on the same arm. It's referring to that. Here's a back view. He's got his left foot on top of the ball. Manacle still around his forearm, almost up to his wrist area, and then the broken one up here. There's the Forever Free in the front, showing part of the chain and manacle around her left foot. And on the side, Edmonia Lewis, 1867. 2 years after emancipation in the United States, and a year before Carpo finished Why Born Enslaved, whereas Carpo represents the theme of abolition by sculpting a bound woman, Lewis sculpts two free figures. Unlike virtually all other such images of the period, the Black man stands rather than sitting or kneeling. With a broken shackle in hand, he raises aloft his fist in a gesture of strength and self-determination. He rests his other hand protectively on the shoulder of his female companion, who kneels and clasps her hands in gratitude. The differing postures of Lewis's figures anticipates the divergent experiences of emancipated men and women, right? Men have rights, women don't have rights yet. Yet the inscription on the base, neither pleading nor beseeching, proclaims forever free. And again, those words in the Emancipation Proclamation. Some critics argued that the postures of the man and woman reinforce stereotypes. Stereotypes about male aggression and female passivity, right? The man standing, the female's kneeling. I think they're being overly picky here, but I'm a male, maybe I'm not seeing it the same way they are. The work upholds patriarchal system that granted men more rights than women. I don't think the work is doing that. The work is kind of stating, hey, they're not going to have the same levels of freedom because the world isn't that way yet. If this had been done 200 years later, but it's like, anyway, I think they're picking here. Man is shown rising while the woman remains on her knees. Female figure lacks distinctive African features or hair. That's interesting. But again, why might she do this? And we're going to think about this. Was this a way to distance the subject from the artist herself? Maybe she's not trying to, she's a female African-American West Indies descent. Does she somehow want to distance herself from this? They call these deracializing figures because they have some African-American qualities, but then they lack some African-American qualities. The deracializing the figures helps broaden the sculpture's appeal for Lewis's largely white audience. Remember, she's in Rome. She's not getting a lot of African-Americans traveling to Rome to buy her sculptures. Clearly her target market is rich, white travelers taking the grand tour. The female figure could be an allusion to mixed ancestry that resulted from intermarriage and rape of enslaved women. I found this oddly, bizarrely fascinating here, and I'll bring back to the art resource guide here. because it's describing this, and it says the female, this is on page 92 of the Art Resource Guide, and it says the female figure could also be an allusion to the mixed ancestry that resulted from intermarriage and the forcible rape of enslaved women, as Lewis herself was the offspring of such an intermarriage. And maybe I'm wrong, but I took out the word forcible, right? So I just wrote intermarriage and rape of enslaved women, because I find it hard to believe that if it's rape, how would it not be forcible rape? I think that's almost insulting to put the word forcible in front of it, because that sort of hints that, well, is there non-forced rape? I mean, it just, to me, that makes no sense. So, but that's just me. So if you're wondering why I didn't put that word in, it's because I object to it philosophically. Anyway, one more slide here. I think we're going to make it. It's like, but wait, we've covered this work. Yes, but there's more that she's alluding to. Remember, while Lewis is embracing neoclassicism, heck, she's in Rome. Neoclassicism, looking at ancient Greece and Rome, right? So she's really, really in a neoclassic state of mind. But this is a style associated with white Europeans. So how can she tweak it and make it hers? Okay. So in a sense, she updated neoclassicism and used it to represent and comment upon issues facing African Americans and Native Americans, which she is a part of both worlds. She created a smaller work in marble called Old Arrow Maker. This is it right here on the side, Old Arrow Maker, and it's a man and his daughter. She did this in 1872. It's based on the Longfellow poem, The Song of Hiawatha, in 1855. Now remember, this is the second time we referred to Longfellow this year in the art. Remember that he wrote a poem about the midnight ride of Paul Revere, which was, taking a lot of historical liberties, but that became so famous that, now we know about Paul Revere and all this other stuff, right? So he also wrote a poem based on Hiawatha. Hiawatha was from the Ojibwa tribe. Art-Edmonia Lewis's mother was from the Ojibwa tribe. Remember, Art-Edmonia Lewis's name is Wildfire. This is going to end in 10 minutes. We're going to make it. Both the father and the daughter here are shown working. The father is making arrowheads while the daughter weaves a mat. They counter the myth of the vanishing Indian, which I spoke about this in one of our earlier paintings. It wasn't one we're specifically studying, but was about the same guy. I think it's the same guy that painted the William Penn making the treaty with the Indians, and it was the death of Colonel or General so-and-so. And there's a Native American Indian there, and it's this trope. It's almost, it's a meme before we had memes, and it's the vanishing Indian. They call it a trope. T-R-O-P-E. You could call it a meme, and it's something that doesn't really exist. It's a myth. Indians aren't vanishing. They're still living today, right? Native American Indians still are here. They haven't vanished. This counters that myth. They're still working. They're still living. It projects the continuity of cultural traditions and craft across multiple generations. Art-Edmonia, of course, finds this extremely important. This image espouses the values of hard work and family. And isn't that a core tenet of good old-fashioned American values, right? Hard work and family. It appealed to the middle-class audiences that Lewis cultivated as patrons. So that is my last slide. I did make it through without us goofing up again, and I can stop my share here, but I'll keep the recording in case you have any questions or any commentary. We've got like 5 minutes before we get unceremoniously booted out. Yeah, thank you. I'm not dead yet. I can still give lectures. So we're trying. Let me know if you have any questions. Sensing a trend of half-naked dudes in today's lectures? Yes. A lot of that. I don't know if you guys have had enough experiences to have traveled and gone to a lot of museums and looked at a lot of statuary, but the next time you have a chance to be in a museum and to be looking at statuary, keep in mind some of the different things we talked about as far as neoclassicism, contrapposta poses, different things like that, because you don't think it's going to matter. I had a neat conversation with a former student yesterday that I hadn't seen in quite some time. And I met him at a Starbucks, and we purposely met. He was on my team back in 2008. He graduated 2008, 2009. And we had this really nice 3-hour conversation. And he was saying, Mr. Decker, all the things you said that I would care about in my 30s that I don't care about now, and trying to get us to study, it's like, I care about them now. And why didn't you tell me that having kids was going to be so hard? You know, and it's so funny to talk to you guys 20, 30 years up the road. I have former students in their 50s. That's getting scary. But this guy was just 31, so it's kind of cool. But it's just neat, you know, and he's really interested in history. And I was actually telling him a little bit about the stuff we've been studying here. And he remembered the stuff that we studied back then. We were studying the Civil War in 2008. And a couple of years before that, we studied different things. And so it's just kind of neat touching base with different people and what he'd studied, what he remembered, and where he'd gone that this had meaning now. So just kind of cool. So I hope you guys practice lifelong learning. It doesn't ever stop. Learning is not a sprint, it's a marathon. My mom's 101. She's still learning things. I go up there and I try to teach her something new every week. So it's interesting. Anyway.
That's exciting. I'll comment on, I was struck by the fabulous photograph of her. And all of a sudden we're seeing photographs. And I couldn't remember whether this was the first one in things you've presented. Maybe not, but it was gorgeous of her. And
right. It's they just found this photograph too. And its photography was just in its infancy in the 1850s.
Like Abraham Lincoln, we've seen photographed. But
yes.
Other people that we've talked about so far, I don't think.
Yeah, no photograph. Yeah, we don't have any photographs of Washington. They just didn't exist yet. So it's really kind of cool.
Absolutely.
And yes, my mother is 101, and she remembers more from the 1920s than from the 2020s. But you know, we're working on it. We go back and forth.
Fabulous.
She made 50 caliber cartridges during World War II. She'll tell that story as often as you want to hear it. Yeah. What?
Arizona?
Yep. She lives about 45 minutes north of me, and I just go up there every weekend and give my sister a breathing spell. Well, guys, I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll go back to doing history, and we'll be starting a new history section next week. We'll be starting section 5 in the art packet next week. So before we get cut off, a brief little nature and nation. So next week we'll be covering places that I've been. Chaco Canyon in New Mexico with ancient Anasazi ruins. My father helped write a book about the area. And Charles Wilson Peel, which is also a blast from last year. The exhumation of the mastodon. We're going to take a look at that. We referenced it, and there was a painting of Peel in his museum lifting up a curtain. You could see mastodon bones behind him. Well, this is a painting of the exhumation of the mastodon that winds up being a full skeleton in his museum. And then we'll talk about Robert S. Duncanson and his view of Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a landscape work. And then we'll finish up. We've only got 4 works left. We'll finish up with the Raven Crest Pole, which is a reproduction carved in 1983 based on a late 19th century original Sitka National Historic Park totem pole. So we're really covering the gamut of history starting with Chaco Canyon, which happened around 800 BC, if I correctly, yeah, between 850 and 1150. Oh, CE, not BC, CE. So we're only going back 1200 years, no big deal. But it doesn't have chocolate, unfortunately, but it does have Chaco. It does have a rock there with a spiral on it called Dagger Rock, and the dagger of the light when the sun hits it at only one time of the year, that maybe it's twice. I think it's on both. It's on the solstice. It's either on one solstice or it's on both equinoxes. I got to reread this, but the dagger comes in and it goes into this little spiral, and I've been in that. I'm trying to find my picture of me next to this spiral and the little dagger that, I don't know, looking for old photos back before we had anything digitized. So I don't know if I'll be able to find that. But yes, I've climbed all over Chaco Canyon and the Mayan ruins down in Yucatan. So a lot of old photos. So there you go. I hope you all have a wonderful time. It's going to kick us out in 34 seconds because these go on 40-minute things. Remaining meeting time to upgrade to Pro. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thanks for sticking it out. I will try to figure out how to take this recording and send it so it can be on your servers. No problem.
Thank you.
See y'all later. Have a good rest of the week.
Convert it into a YouTube video. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do with all of them. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye, Paula.